My girlfriend faked a pregnancy to trap me, then blamed me for losing the baby. You ever have one of those moments where your entire life feels like it's about to change in the span of a few seconds? Like a single sentence is all it takes to split reality into the before and the after? That was me the night my girlfriend, Alyssa, told me she was pregnant. It was a Friday night, nothing special. I had just gotten home from work, still shaking off the stress of a long week. The apartment smelled like takeout. The TV was playing some random sitcom, and Alyssa was curled up on the couch in her oversized hoodie, scrolling through her phone like she always did. Everything felt normal until it wasn't. I had just kicked off my shoes and was mid-stretch when she spoke. "I'm pregnant." Just like that. 2 words. No build-up, no nervous preamble, no dramatic pause. Just a statement, tossed out into the air like she was commenting on the weather. I froze. My brain short-circuited for a second, trying to process what I just heard. "What?" She bit her lip, looking down at her lap, then back up at me, her big brown eyes suddenly glossy, like she was on the verge of tears. "I'm pregnant," she repeated softer this time. "I know it's a lot to take in, but it's real. I took a test. A few. Actually, my heart pounded. Pregnant. We hadn't been trying for a baby. Hell, we had explicitly talked about not having kids anytime soon. Alyssa was on birth control, or at least that's what she told me. We weren't reckless. I mean, sure, accidents happen, but this? You're serious?" I asked. She nodded. And that's when everything inside me flipped. Because despite the shock, despite the sheer terror of an unplanned pregnancy, a different part of me, the responsible part, the one raised to believe you step up when life throws something unexpected at you, kicked in. I walked over, sat down next to her, and took her hand. "We'll figure this out," I told her. Her body trembled, and she let out a shaky breath, like she had been waiting for me to say that. Like she was scared I'd react differently. Angry, dismissive, maybe even cruel. But that's not who I am. If she was pregnant, I wasn't going to run. The first few minutes after that were a blur. I remember her leaning into me, resting her head on my chest, whispering about how nervous she was, how scared she'd been to tell me. I reassured her the best I could, even though my own head was spinning. But beneath all that, beneath the shock and the fear, there was something else. A feeling I couldn't quite place at the time. Not doubt, not exactly, but something that made my gut twist. It wasn't until later that night, when I was lying awake staring at the ceiling, that I realized what it was. None of this made sense. I started replaying the last few months in my head. Alyssa hadn't mentioned being late. She hadn't complained about nausea, no morning sickness, no sudden food cravings or mood swings beyond her usual ones. I'd seen pregnant women before, friends, co-workers, my own sister a few years back, and Alyssa didn't seem like one of them. But hey, every pregnancy is different, right? Maybe she just wasn't showing symptoms yet. Maybe I was overthinking things because I was still processing the news. Except that feeling in my gut wouldn't go away. And then there was the doctor thing. The next morning, while she was still asleep, I decided to bring it up casually. "So, when's your first doctor's appointment?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. Alyssa, still half buried in blankets, blinked at me. "I don't have one yet." I frowned. "You haven't called?" "I will," she mumbled, rolling over. "There's no rush." I wasn't an expert on this stuff, but I was pretty damn sure that the first thing most women do when they find out they're pregnant is schedule a doctor's visit. I knew how careful doctors were about tracking everything early on, checking hormone levels, confirming the pregnancy with ultrasounds, all of that. "Well, I could go with you," I offered. "We can book something today." She groaned into her pillow. "Not today. I just want to rest." That was excuse number one. Over the next 2 weeks, she dodged every attempt I made to bring it up. "They won't even do an ultrasound yet. It's too early. I already took a test at home. No need to rush to a doctor. I just want to enjoy the moment before all the medical stuff starts." The alarms in my head got louder each time. And then there was the test itself. I realized something weird. She never showed it to me. Most women, at least from what I knew, usually show the test to their partner, right? That little stick with the 2 pink lines, proof that their whole life just changed. But Alyssa never did. I asked about it once, just offhandedly. "Do you still have the test?" Her reaction was instant. She flinched, just for a second. Then she quickly shook her head. "No," I threw it away. "Why?" Something was off. That gut feeling, the one I tried to ignore, was now screaming at me. And that's when I did something I never thought I'd do. I snooped. Alyssa kept all her medical documents in a folder in our bedroom closet. I had seen it before when she needed paperwork for insurance. So, one night, while she was in the shower, I opened the closet, heart pounding, and flipped through the papers. Bills, old prescriptions, insurance forms, an old x-ray from when she twisted her ankle last year. But nothing about a pregnancy. Not one appointment. Not one lab result. Not one ultrasound. I stood there in front of that closet, my fingers gripping the stack of papers a little too tightly, my breath coming out in short, uneven bursts. My mind was racing, my stomach twisting in knots. She lied. She had looked me dead in the eyes, let me hold her, comfort her, whisper reassurances about how we'd figure this out together. And the whole time, it had been a lie. My first instinct was denial. Maybe I missed something. Maybe I was jumping to conclusions. Maybe she did have a record somewhere, and I just hadn't found it yet. I forced myself to go through the papers again, this time slower. I flipped through every receipt, every document, every scribbled note. Still nothing. Then, just to be sure, I checked the bathroom trash. Nothing. I checked the little bin in our bedroom where she tossed random things. Old makeup, crumpled receipts, notes she didn't need anymore. Still nothing. Not even a single-use pregnancy test. It felt like my body was moving in slow motion as I stepped back from the closet, swallowing down the sick feeling rising in my throat. My hands were shaking. My entire body was shaking. What the hell was I supposed to do now? I needed proof. My first instinct was to confront her right away, to march into the bathroom, yank back the shower curtain, and demand to know what the hell was going on. But something stopped me. I don't know if it was shock or anger or just plain disbelief, but I couldn't do it. Not yet. I needed to be sure. I needed more than just missing documents. I needed undeniable proof. So, I did something I never thought I'd do. I decided to check her phone. Now, I'm not the kind of guy who snoops. Even when things got tense between us in the past, even when I had my doubts about certain things, I never felt the urge to go through her phone. It always felt like a line that shouldn't be crossed. But this wasn't just normal relationship doubts. This was huge. If she was lying about this, then I had no idea what else she was capable of. So, while the shower was still running, I grabbed her phone from the nightstand. The lock screen lights up. There was a password, but during our time living together, I had accidentally seen her enter it multiple times, so it wasn't a problem for me. I hesitated for a split second, then swiped up and went straight to her messages. And that's when I found everything. At first, I didn't even know what I was looking for. I just started scrolling, scanning names, looking for something, anything that might confirm my suspicions. And then I found the texts. A conversation with her best friend, Mia. I clicked on it and my heart just about stopped. Alyssa, I told him. He actually bought it. Mia, OMG, are you serious? What did he say? Alyssa, freaked out a little, but then he hugged me and said we'll figure it out. He looked so serious, like he was already planning the rest of our lives. Mia, LMAO, I can't believe you actually went through with it. You're insane. Alyssa, I had to. He was getting distant, and I could feel him pulling away. This will keep him around. Mia, girl, you're playing with fire. What's the plan? How long can you even keep this up? Alyssa, a few months at least. Then I'll say I had a miscarriage. He'll feel bad and probably want to stay with me even more. I felt my vision blur as I stared at the words on the screen. My whole body locked up. It wasn't just a lie. It was a trap. She had planned this, calculated it, thought about every step, down to how she would break the fake news later to manipulate me even further. I scrolled down, my hands numb, my brain barely able to process what I was reading. Mia, ugh, I still think this is risky. What if he finds out? Alyssa, he won't. He trusts me too much. That was her mistake. She thought I trusted her too much to ever question her. She thought I'd never catch on. The shower was still running. She had no idea what I had just found. For a second, I just stood there, my fists clenched, my whole body buzzing with rage. I wanted to storm in there and confront her immediately. But then something inside me clicked. No, not yet. She thinks she's in control. She thinks she can manipulate me. I wasn't going to let her see me explode. Not yet. So, I put her phone back exactly how I found it. I closed the closet. I walked out of the bedroom like nothing had happened. I needed to think. I needed a plan, because if she wanted to play dirty, I was about to turn the whole game against her. I walked out of the bedroom like nothing had happened. But inside, I was burning. Not just anger, something deeper. A kind of betrayal that settled into my bones, turning my blood cold. Every moment I had spent comforting her, every whispered reassurance, every single time I had told her we would figure this out, it was all based on a lie. And not just some spur-of-the-moment lie. A plan. She had crafted this, thought about it, built it up in her head. She knew exactly what she was doing, how to twist the situation, so I'd have no choice but to stay. And I had fallen for it. I needed air. I grabbed my keys and left the apartment without saying a word. I could hear the shower still running as I closed the door behind me. She had no idea I was gone. I didn't even know where I was driving. I just needed to move, to get away from that space, to clear my head before I did something I'd regret. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. I had two choices. Confront her immediately, walk back in there, slam her phone down on the table, and demand an explanation. But then what? She'd lie, she'd twist it, she'd play the victim. I had read the messages. She had already planned for this. She knew exactly how to spin this story, how to manipulate me into feeling guilty. Play the long game. Act normal. Pretend I didn't know, at least for a little while. Gather more proof. Let her dig her own grave until there was no way out. Option 2 was the smart choice. But it was also the hardest, because every second I spent pretending was another second I had to look at her and act like I didn't know she had just tried to trap me into staying. I pulled into an empty parking lot and just sat there, gripping the wheel, staring at nothing. I had never felt this level of betrayal before in my entire life. And the worst part? I had actually been excited. I didn't even realize it at first, but some part of me had started picturing it. The idea of being a dad, of stepping up, of figuring it all out. Even through the fear and stress, I had told myself that maybe this was just life's way of pushing me in a direction I hadn't planned for. And now I felt like an idiot. By the time I drove back home, I had made my decision. I was going to wait, not for long, just long enough to see how far she would take this, to let her think she was still in control. And then, when the time was right, I'd pull the rug out from under her so hard she wouldn't know what hit her. I took a deep breath before walking back inside. The second I opened the door, Alyssa looked up from the couch, wrapped in a blanket, her damp hair falling over her shoulders. "Where'd you go?" she asked, her voice soft, cautious. "Just needed some air," I said, forcing a small smile. She studied me, searching my face for something. Guilt, maybe? Or maybe she was checking to see if I had figured anything out. For a split second, I wondered if she could tell, if she could feel the way everything had shifted. But then she just nodded and scooted over on the couch, patting the space beside her. "Come sit with me," she said. "I missed you." I sat next to her, and the second I did, she leaned into me, resting her head against my chest. Like nothing had happened. Like she wasn't sitting there, planning the next step in a fake pregnancy designed to keep me locked in place. I forced myself to wrap an arm around her, to keep my voice steady when I spoke. "So, have you thought about when you want to see a doctor?" I asked. She tensed for half a second, so quick that most people wouldn't notice. But I did. I felt her shoulders tighten, the way her breathing stalled just slightly before she recovered. "Yes," she said. "I was actually thinking of calling tomorrow." "That's great," I said, nodding. "Do you need me to come with you?" She let out a small, nervous laugh. "No, it's just a checkup. I'll let you know what they say." She was still committing to the lie. She had a chance to come clean right then and there, to back out before she dug the hole deeper. But she didn't take it. And that's when I knew she wasn't going to stop until I forced her hand. For the next 2 days, I played my role perfectly. I talked about baby names. I brought up future plans. I acted just excited enough for her to believe she had me completely under her thumb. She ate it up. I could see it in the way she smiled at me, in the way she relaxed, like she had won, like I was locked in place, exactly where she wanted me. And then, on the 3rd day, I made my move. I waited until the evening, after dinner, when we were both lying on the couch watching TV. I kept my voice casual, my expression neutral. "So, how was the doctor's appointment?" I asked. Alyssa was mid-bite, spoon halfway to her mouth, and I watched as her entire body stiffened. She blinked, swallowed too quickly, then forced a smile. It was fine, she said. Nothing really new, just a confirmation. I tilted my head. Confirmation? Yeah, she said, shifting uncomfortably. You know, like making sure everything's normal and stuff. And they didn't give you any paperwork? I asked, keeping my tone light. Not this one? No blood test results. Her eyes darted away for half a second. She shrugged. They said it's still too early for an ultrasound. I nodded slowly. Oh, okay. What was the doctor's name again? She froze. And in that one moment, I knew she was trapped. I watched the realization settle over her face. The slow unraveling of her confidence as she realized she had no answer. A few seconds passed, the silence stretching between us like a noose tightening around her neck. Then, finally, she let out a shaky breath. She swallowed. I have to tell you something. And I just sat there, staring at her, waiting, because I knew exactly what was coming next. Alyssa sat motionless, gripping the fabric of her hoodie with trembling fingers, her breathing uneven as she tried to pull herself together. The weight of my question hung in the air between us. She had no doctor's name, no paperwork, no proof, nothing to justify the lie she had spun so carefully. And yet, instead of breaking down and confessing, she steeled herself, her face crumpling into an expression of raw devastation. She let out a shaky breath, then spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. She hadn't wanted to tell me like this. She had needed time to process it, to come to terms with what had happened before she had to break my heart. The doctor had told her something was wrong. The pregnancy wasn't viable. She had lost the baby. Her voice cracked at the last part, and almost immediately, the tears started. She pressed a hand to her stomach like the loss physically pained her, her shoulders shaking as she sobbed. The performance was flawless. If I hadn't already known the truth, I might have believed it. Instead, I just sat there, watching her unravel, feeling nothing but cold, quiet rage. Alyssa kept talking through her tears, explaining that it had all happened so fast. The doctor had assured her it wasn't her fault, that these things just happen sometimes. She hadn't done anything wrong, but the pregnancy simply hadn't survived. She had been devastated, too heartbroken to tell me right away. I exhaled slowly and leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. She sniffled, wiping her face, stealing glances at me to see if I was falling for it. I asked for details, what exactly the doctor had said, what the diagnosis was. She hesitated for a fraction of a second before repeating her story, but she kept it vague, like she was too emotional to remember the specifics. I let her talk, let her believe, for just a little longer, that she was getting away with this. Then, I asked her for the doctor's name. For the first time since she started talking, she froze. Just for a moment, just long enough to be noticeable. Then, recovering quickly, she gave me a name, throwing it out casually, as if she had it ready. I nodded slowly, then asked where the clinic was located. Another hesitation. She fumbled through an answer, saying it was downtown. I pressed further. Which clinic? She faltered again, her confidence unraveling right in front of me. That's when I said it. She had never been pregnant. The second the words left my mouth, her whole body stiffened like she had been electrocuted. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She blinked rapidly, hands clenched into fists on her lap. And then, like a switch flipping, the tears stopped. She erupted in fury, suddenly on her feet, screaming at me. How dare I accuse her of something like that? How could I be so heartless, so cruel? She had just told me she lost our baby, and my first reaction was to call her a liar? Did I even love her at all? I stayed silent, watching her rage. Her voice cracked as she continued, throwing every accusation she could at me, saying I never cared, that I never wanted this baby in the first place, that she should have known I wouldn't support her. I let her talk, let her throw every desperate, manipulative word at me. Then, when she finally started to run out of breath, I told her I had seen her texts. She froze again, her entire body going still. I repeated myself. I had read the messages between her and Mia. The ones where she admitted to faking the pregnancy to keep me from leaving. The ones where she said she planned to fake a miscarriage if I ever got suspicious. That was exactly what she had just done. Her mouth opened slightly, her eyes darting away, her hands twitching as if reaching for another lie to cling to. But she had nothing left. And just like that, her rage came roaring back. Her face twisted with fury as she turned it around on me, screaming about how I had invaded her privacy, how going through her phone was just as bad as anything she had done. She called me a manipulative asshole, accused me of violating her trust. I violated her trust? She was the one who had lied about something life-changing just to manipulate me. Alyssa's eyes were wild now, her face red, her whole body trembling with rage and desperation. Then, suddenly, she did something I hadn't expected. She grabbed her purse and bolted for the door. I didn't stop her. I didn't say a single word as she yanked it open, slammed it behind her, and ran. For a long moment, I just stood there, staring at the door. It was over. But I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't the last time I'd hear from her. The apartment felt eerily quiet after she ran out. Just moments ago, the place had been filled with screaming, hers mostly layered with desperation and anger, the last gasps of a lie collapsing in on itself. Now, all I could hear was the faint hum of the refrigerator and my own breathing. I wasn't relieved. Not yet, because Alyssa wasn't the type to just disappear. She had spent weeks crafting this lie, carefully manipulating me, setting everything up so she could keep me trapped in this relationship. She wasn't just going to let it all fall apart without a fight. I knew her well enough to know that much. I needed to prepare for whatever came next. The first thing I did was to back up every screenshot of the message between her and Mia, every conversation where she admitted to faking the pregnancy. I saved them on my laptop, emailed them to myself, and even printed out several copies just in case. If Alyssa decided to spin this into some new lie, if she told people that I was the one who had abandoned her after a miscarriage, or worse, tried to paint me as some kind of abusive villain, I needed to be ready. She had no limits when it came to twisting the truth. I wasn't going to give her the chance. I didn't have to wait long before Alyssa made her move. It started with texts. At first, they were pathetic. She sent message after message, talking about how she had panicked, how she had just been scared of losing me, how she had made a horrible mistake. She wanted to explain. She wanted to talk. She wanted to fix things. I ignored all of them. Then the messages shifted. The apologies stopped, replaced with accusations. Now, I was the bad guy. I was cruel for leaving her in such an emotional state. I was heartless for not even hearing her out. I was the villain for not supporting her after everything we had been through. She went from begging to blaming in a matter of hours. When the text didn't work, she started calling. I didn't answer. Then came the voicemails. First it was crying, then anger, then more crying. The emotional roller coaster was exhausting, even though I wasn't responding. I had already blocked her number, but Alyssa was nothing if not persistent. She found ways around it, calling from unknown numbers, messaging me from random new accounts. She was spiraling, and she still wasn't done. The first time I heard that Alyssa was telling people her version of events, I wasn't even surprised. A mutual friend texted me, asking what had happened. Apparently, Alyssa had told everyone that she had tragically miscarried, and instead of comforting her, I had cruelly abandoned her and kicked her out of the apartment. That was the story she was going with. I stared at the text, shaking my head. She really thought she could get away with this. I wasted no time. I didn't go around telling my side of the story. I didn't need to. Instead, I sent a handful of people the screenshots, just enough to make sure the truth got out. I didn't add any commentary. Just cold, undeniable proof. It spread faster than I expected. Within a day, Alyssa's lie had completely collapsed. People who had first sent me concerned messages now reached out in shock, some even apologizing for believing her so easily. I heard through mutual friends that Alyssa had gone silent. After her story got exposed, she disappeared from social media, stopped responding to messages. She had tried to manipulate the wrong person, and now she had to deal with the consequences. For a while, I thought she was done. That maybe, finally, she had realized she couldn't twist this any further. Then, a few weeks later, she showed up at my door. I wasn't surprised. She stood there, looking nothing like the furious, desperate person who had stormed out that night. Now, she was quiet, eyes downcast, hands wringing the strap of her purse like she was some fragile, heartbroken victim. She told me she just wanted to talk. I let her say what she needed to say. She went on about how she had made mistakes, how she had just wanted to keep me, how she thought if we had a baby, everything would work out. She said she never meant to hurt me, that she loved me, that she would never forgive herself for what she had done. I listened. I let her talk. Then I told her, calmly and without hesitation, that I wanted nothing to do with her ever again. The moment I said it, something flickered in her eyes, something cold, something angry. But she swallowed it down, nodded, and walked away without another word. I watched her disappear down the hallway, and just like that, she was finally out of my life. It took a while for the dust to settle. Even though Alyssa was gone, the whole thing left a mark on me. I spent weeks replaying everything in my head, wondering how I hadn't seen it sooner. But in the end, I was just relieved it was over. Alyssa had wanted to trap me, to force me into staying with her. She had built an entire lie to keep me from leaving. But in the end, all she had done was destroy any chance she ever had with me. And I would never let someone like that have power over me again.